Hello, everyone. Yes, our speaker is here, so we can start, I guess. So thank you for joining for the second day of Broadening Carbon Ring Summer School. So just to remind you that this program is made possible by the support of National Science Foundation of the United States. This is the third summer school under the program of AccelNet and the project of Broadening Carbon Ring under the AccelNet program. Today we have three excellent speakers. We'll start with Dr. Ji Zhu from University of Chicago and also the National Lab. Are you ready, Dr. Zhu?
Yes. So I'm trying to start my video, but it is disabled by the host.
Oh, let me try to fix that. I don't know where I can do that. Okay, I allowed you to share. That help you? Owen and Dr. Wang, maybe you can work on it while I'll introduce Dr. Zhu. Okay, so let me introduce Dr. Zhu. So Dr. Ji Zhu is an assistant professor in the Ritzker School of Molecular Engineering and scientist affiliated with Oregon National Lab. Dr. Zhu received her PhD in chemistry from Nanjing University and then subsequently completed her postdoctoral training at Stanford University, where she pioneered advances in intrinsically stretchable electronic materials. Prior to joining the University of Chicago, she led the development of Polybot, one of the nation's pioneering autonomous labs for AI-driven materials discovery at Oregon's Center for Nanoscale Materials. Her research combines polymer science, robotics, artificial intelligence, automation, and advanced manufacturing to create self-driving labs capable of accelerating the discovery of next-generation functional materials. Dr. Zhu has received numerous prestigious honors, including the MIT Technology Review Innovators Under 35, the Materials Horizons Emerging Investigator Award, and the ACS PMSC Young Investigator Award. Today, she will share her vision for AI-guided autonomous materials discovery. Dr. Ji, can you try? Okay.
Yes. So
yes.
Yeah, I can share my screen, but somehow I cannot start my video so that my face is.
I'll try to work on it while you're presenting. I'm sorry. If I can solve the problem, we can go back to your video probably. I apologize for that. I don't know where the setting is, but I'll find out.
Okay.
But yeah, you could start if it's okay for you. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for this great opportunity to introduce autonomous discovery, autonomous lab, and also I will use my research domain area, functional polymer, as a case study to show the power of AI-guided robotic laboratory. So so this is kind of just a general video to show, but I'm going to show the details in the following talks.
Job is to turn these packages.
Yeah, so you may be pretty familiar with self-driving cars, humanoid robots, and AI, for example, AI pets that my kids are playing from the social media. So these are all examples of embodied intelligence. So physical AI. So where AI is actually connected to a physical body and can close the perception and action loop. So in science, the equivalent is not necessarily a humanoid robot, right? It can be an autonomous laboratory where the body of the AI is actually a set of laboratory instruments, robotic platforms, sensors, characterization tools. So this is kind of the embodied AI that we would envision in material science and also chemistry field. Then here, the real challenge is not just the movement or locomotion. It's actually we need to build AI system that really understand the scientific context of their actions, make meaningful experimental decisions, and also adapt to the long tail of variability in real-world experiments. So then accelerated discovery with autonomous lab. So this is a very simple concept, but very ambitious vision, I would say. Given a problem, for example, or given a question, or given a high-level description of a hypothesis, lab computer decides what to do based on the database, pre-trained knowledge, and then AI and the robot autonomously carries out the experiment workflows to confirm or reject that hypothesis. So this is the kind of the general concept of autonomous discovery. From a platform development or from an infrastructure development perspective, we need data, we need robot, we need analysis protocols and AI to achieve this autonomous lab. But in chemistry, in material discovery, we need more ingredients. So to really make the autonomous lab to be really functional for accelerating material discovery, we need to have more ingredients. For example, we need to have automation-friendly chemistry that can really produce the molecule or the material that you want it to be, right? And also have a hot formula doesn't mean you have a material. You also need to think about what could be an automation-friendly processing and characterization tools here. And then we need to develop AI/ML or data technology for materials and chemistry. So for example, the way that we show how we're going to show our material or chemistry problem, how we're going to represent those problems, or how we're going to select the features to show it to machine learning, right? What are the data analysis protocol, machine learning, language model, how to make it to be suitable for chemistry and materials, agents. So those are all detailed ingredients we need to further develop so that we can make the autonomous lab to be really practically functional for material discovery. So then looking globally, this is not a completed list. This is just give you an idea where the Polybot it is, where we are. So there are many AI-guided automated labs across the entire world. We are one of them, especially we are good at in functional polymers. So we are here in the Midwest of US, very close to Chicago, big city. And then Polybot is attached to, so Polybot has two campuses. One is at Argonne National Lab. Last year, I joined University of Chicago developing another Polybot version 2 there. So then we also have the synchrotron characterization ring here. Polybot is attached to the first Polybot campus is attached to this one. So then I joined Argonne 2018 Christmas time. That time basically was the starting point that I was thinking about AI-guided robotic discovery. So that was also the kind of the starting point of the journey. So Polybot journey start from around 2019. So that time we don't have many robotic systems that designed for lab automation, especially chemistry and material science, right? And also we don't have a data pipeline that allow the hardware to be able to talk with AI. So therefore, that's also a big challenge of a critical technical gap here. And also, this is something we learn when we are building this Polybot. The quality of the data is also a key element here. You have a data, then how you're going to ensure the data is meaningful, is reproducible, and is ready to show to AI. So those are basically the starting technical gaps that we need to develop at the beginning, and also we need to fill in during this during this journey. So 2019, we quickly identify what an autonomous polymer lab or what autonomous lab must have, and then build a team across polymer science or material science and automation and data machine learning. Then we also have a design principle for our lab is that because it is serving as a user tour in national user facility, it has to be modular, extensible, and reproducible. So those are the starting point. Then in terms of the Polybot, the self-driving lab stack, hardware-wise, the concept is pretty simple, or like the action item is very straightforward. So you basically want to convert human-operated instruments or lab characterization tools or like synthesis platforms inside of a conventional lab into automated. So that's the first one, to integrate the hardware species here. So then second, we need to build the software. So this is critical. So the software development is actually serving as the backbone or castration layer, or maybe a nervous system thinking about the body, right? So the software, I apologize for using this pretty sketchy slides, but this is the slides. I really like this slides. This slides was come out from a hackathon at very beginning, 2021. But this slides basically describe all the foundational elements that we are still following to run our Polybot self-driving lab. So basically, we need to develop a central computer that can be able to interface with all the robotic platforms, automated platforms in the labs, so that it can enable the command to run the robot and also get the data back. And also, we need to have extraction tools so that we can extract the raw data from the experimental producers, then to come out and process AI-ready data. And then we also need to have a data management system that is able for us to remember the state of the lab and also do a data organization and also data storage. And then the other critical part is the AML part. So here we basically need to have a training software to train our model, and also we have a library of machine learning algorithm that allow us to select which will be the best suit for the case studies. And so for some studies, if it's needed, we also can incorporate digital twin here, or like simulated features or modeling result to help us to further improve the number of the features. So also we need to have a data validation tool here to ensure first of all, data are reproducible, and also allow us to kind of be able to track back this history of this lab. So this is a software pipeline, software infrastructure of the Polybot lab. Then the third critical element is actually the decision intelligence. Having the hardware integrated, having the data pipeline integrated, that doesn't mean you can make a decision, right? We need to have a decision, we need to have a brain, have a logic here. So the philosophy here is, okay, once we make a decision, the universe comprised to make it happen. That's kind of our philosophy. We would like to leverage all the advanced data science technologies that can help us to make decision wiser. So in my following research talk, I will guide you through every elements here that I will put here. But those are basically the Polybot development stack, hardware integration, software data pipeline integration, and then decision intelligence. What are the logic here? So this is the current layout of, this is the layout of Polybot from 2 years ago. Now we have 2 more robotic platform in it. But as you can see, the goal here is to build a parent infrastructure that can host many workflows. Here, our goal is not one perfect pipeline. We want a robust platform that can be stressed and refined for different material problems. That's kind of the user facilities goal. So this is kind of the methodology development what is autonomous lab? What are the critical development efforts in it to enable this self-driving lab, to enable this novel methodology? Then the consequence of this new methodology would be changing the way that we answer questions. Then what are the questions we want to answer? So my research background is actually polymer. So therefore, I will use polymeric materials, the research problem in this field, to leverage the tool for demonstrating the power. So polymers are actually a backbone of modern science and engineering. It's enabling like technologies ranging from aerospace insulation, biomedical implants, drug dispensions, robotic muscles, and even like, okay, foldable screens, right? Stretchable screens, wearable electronics, or even like future lunar bases, Mars bases. So polymeric materials are very, well, it is basically everywhere, right? The global polymer market 2024 is on the order of 0.7 to 0.8 trillion, close to semiconducting global market. So that's kind of the impact of polymeric material innovation. Then here, look at here. So this is a plot showing the qualitative representation of processing and the composition complexity of different functional materials. Functional polymers is right here. High complexity in processing, high complexity in composition. Well, this gave us potentials. This also create challenges. So that's a great stress bed for us to test the new methodology. So I want to dive a little bit deeper. So why do polymeric materials need autonomous lab and why they are hard? So polymers are actually can be considered as a high dimensional materials. It might be similar to other material system as well. For example, when you have a polymeric materials, the design space is all the way from saying, okay, the chemical structure species, the monomers, sequence, architectures, even the formula additives. It also heavily related to the processing conditions, processing histories, to enable different type of morphologies that will change your solid state properties dramatically. And also is a lot of time polymeric material is not serving the function as its own, but it's also be working together with other material to form a hybrid, to form a multi-layer structure. So therefore, it's pretty challenging to design polymeric materials to achieve the function. For example, this is a transistor built by semiconducting polymer. I use this one, give example. So transistor is a basic building blocks for our current computer, right? The chips. Then to enable a good transistor, polymeric transistor, we need to design the polymer chemical structure, control the monomer structure, neighboring structures, molecular weight, and we need to process the morphology into the desirable morphology with desirable ordering. And we need to fabricate this single layer semiconducting polymer with electrode so that we can fabricate a device. So the interface also matters. So as a whole, determine the function of this products. So that's kind of a high dimensional design. So therefore, it's pretty hard. So in my following talk, I want to talk about how Polybot, how self-driving lab can assist us to design those functional polymers, specifically electronic functional polymer discovery, all the way from a single chain design to the controlled assembly to realizing the functionality in fabricated device. So we'll start from the inverse design, the single chain design. So the grand challenge of functional materials is actually the inverse design, right? Starting from desired property and working backward to discover structure and the composition. So here we propose two loop workflow for inverse design, with the inner loop to enable on-demand synthesis, while the outer loop to enable on-demand property. So then the first property that we are pretty interested in is electrochromic property. So electrochromic materials okay. If we get on Boeing 787, You press the button right here to change the transparency of your window. That is made by electrochromic material, and also smart windows and many smart displays. So electrochromic materials actually has been developed for quite a while, all the way from the metal oxide to the Voyaging system. And nowadays, people are very interested in conjugated polymers because of the low cost, large scale manufacturing. So then a typical electrochromic polymers usually stay at colored state when it is neutral. When an oxidative potential is applied, the polymer will be oxidized into radical cation. Then their absorption is also get changed. Then the electrochromic polymers would become a transmittive colorless state. This is kind of a typical color switching mechanism in this electrochromic polymers. And also, as you can see here, today people can make different colors for such electrochromic polymers. So then what is the challenge here? Chromic is a color. For color application, we are not just looking for red color, green color. We are looking for a specific RGB value. We're looking for a specific LAB color value that require accuracy. To achieve the accuracy, traditionally, we need to do many optimization so that we can hit the target precisely. So this cause challenges, right? It's going to be an intrinsic trade-off between accuracy and efficiency. So therefore, we want to use self-driving lab to help the material scientist to overcome this trade-off. So here, now how to tune the color? How to tune the color of a conjugated polymer, of an electronic conjugated polymer. So color originates from the absorption. Absorption of conjugated polymers are mainly influenced by three factors here: the monomer energy levels, dihedral angles between the neighboring monomer building blocks, and also the monomer composition. So basically, the polymer chain formulation is a critical role. Or we can make our hypothesis that using the polymer chain formulation, we can precisely control the absorption and the color, and then we can use autonomous lab to address the trade-off between the accuracy and the efficiency. So that's kind of the status before we run the autonomous exploration. So then now this is the inverse design workflow we come out for this study. It's actually a pretty generalizable workflow. To run autonomous discovery, first of all, we need to have a database so for many functional materials, like here, electrochromic polymers, there's no public accessible database ready. There could be database in industry, but when you are looking at the website, public accessible resources, there isn't. So therefore, sometimes we need to think about how to initialize our database. Then when you have the database, we need to think about how we are going to show our material, how we are going to let machine learning understand our data, so that understand this science, so that we need to have a data representation method here to translate this data to let machine learning understand it. So then we also need to select a suitable machine learning method that for this specific exploration journey. And then this is not the end, right? It's not just predicting. We also want to produce the products. We also need to think about what could be the automation and robust, automation friendly and also robust chemistry that can really allow us to synthesize those polymers accordingly and then enable autonomous discovery, iterative design. So this is kind of the inverse design workflow we lined up for this study. Yeah, as I explained, there's no public accessible electrochromic database. Now we have, we published the database. So then when the time we started this project, there wasn't any public accessible database. The way that we do is we leverage the legacy, the literature. So we develop a data mining method to mine the structure property relationship by doing the text mining and graph mining. So the reason we are not just doing text mining is because, see here, the picture here. So for example, in this paper, if you just go to the text, then you will say you get a polymer A with blue color, polymer B with blue color. Well, that's not accurate. So therefore, instead of just mine the text, knowledge from the text, we directly go to the raw data they publish, which is the absorption spectrum, and then do image segmentation to extract the color codes out of the absorption, the raw data, then to build our structure property relationship here, the database. So then in terms of which machine learning algorithm is good, is suitable for this statistical copolymer system. So by looking at this case study, we want the monomer, basically the molecular structure as a set for the features that we want to show to machine learning. And the electronic structure of the monomers matters. So this is another set of features. And then this is the chain formulation, right? Then the formulation, the composition ratio is another set of features that we want to show machine learning. So therefore, this is a set problem. Then the set transformer is the one that we selected as a good option for this set related task. And we also did a kind of a bench comparison with other popular machine learning algorithm. And indeed, this set transformer algorithm is outperforming than others. We're also in purpose pumping some in-house data to even the data by the uneven data in the literature mined data sets so that we can increase the accuracy of the prediction model. But here I would like to say we don't need to have a perfect prediction model here. It's just okay. I mean, okay is good enough because in the future, autonomous discovery will do active learning, iterative optimization. So that will catch up, even though the machine learning model prediction accuracy is not perfect here. Okay, so this is kind of initial prediction model we developed for this system. Then the next thing is how we are going to cook it, right? How we're going to use the chemistry to really join all the building blocks together to our desirable structure. So here we use a direct stage annihilation reaction as our chemistry here to join different building blocks together. So we are pretty familiar with this kind of reaction. Then the thing is, when I ask my students and also senior postdoc, chemistry background postdoc, are you confident that the conditions, the reaction conditions that you selected is the best condition that allow us to reach, relative good yield for all the building blocks? Well, the answer is no, right? So therefore, even though we understand this reaction, but we are not sure whether the condition that we learn from literature or we selected is the best. So therefore, we run a reaction optimization using our robotic platform quickly to down select the best reaction conditions so that we will utilize this condition for the autonomous discovery. So this step is optional. It's just for our polymerization. We're not confident, but if you have a very robust chemistry that you are confident, you don't need to do this step. Yeah. So then thinking about the autonomous discovery, so in this research, we need to synthesize the polymer, we need to characterize the polymer, and we need a transfer robot to transfer the cooked polymer into the characterization station and close the loop. So this is a cooperative robotic system and need to have the cloud data workflow. So that's kind of how we quickly lined up this workflow for this study. So once you build the parent workflow, it doesn't take long to have all this system integrated because it's modular. So then once you have this system ready, then you can ask the question, I want a color. So you can see here. So those are the building blocks that available we launched to our synthesis robot. And this is the color map, all the triangle filled in colors. So those are representing existing electrochromic polymers people has already discovered in the past. several decades. Then we select 2 targeted color area in the unsampled area to ask the polybot to see which formulation is the best. So here, as you can see, so this is the autonomous optimization or autonomous exploration in a large but bounded composition space. So the synthesis robot is basically selecting the building block and forming the composition according to the machine learning model suggestion, and then synthesize out this polymer. Then this transfer robot let the transfer this product into the UV-Vis plate reader to get absorption and get the color codes back, sent to the AI to see whether we hit the goal. If not, it continue. The termination criteria here are basically, first of all, whether we meet the objective. Second of all, okay, we meet the objective, whether there's further improvement. Third, okay, here is the budget, finish within this budget. So this is the result. So basically, this is a starting color. We pick orange and also green color. In loop two, polybot already produced the targeted the polymer that meet the objective criteria. Then it didn't stop. It just triggered the loop 3 to see whether there's further improvement. Then it realized, okay, there's no further improvement, then terminate the entire exploration. It's only 72 hours to finish this task. This kind of show the power. And also this is a formula. As you can see, this is a 3 building block statistical copolymer system, 0.05 ingredients, very large design space. So this is also give you an idea. So look at the first row. So this first row having very different colors. But their formula, look at their building blocks, look at their chemical structure, look pretty similar. So slightly change in the chemical structure formula can change the color dramatically. Then if you look at the second row and also the third row, you'll see this is the green seam, this is the yellow seam. They are using totally different building blocks that can achieve similar color codes. So this is the way that I see the power. I can propose something individually, but I cannot see everything. So that's kind of the power of machine learning, can allow you to see everything. So then, yeah, we can make a rainbow. And then, yeah, it is electrochromic. We use AccelJet printer to print a flexible display from this electrochromic materials. So for this work, we also produce interactive interface so that for the community to inject data and also to play around with this database. For example, I'm looking at the color, but some people may looking at the absorption, right? So this is an open source database and also has an interface for people to work together. And then design of polybot, lab automation, and also decision intelligence. So in this work, we talk about the synthesis characterization. We talk about the language model in terms of helping with the data mining and also literature search, right? Design agent and machine learning agent. So those are the elements we covered in this research. Having a formula design doesn't mean you have a property. Polymer, we need to think about how we are going to put this chemical structure into the packing structure to enable the function. So the second case study, I'm going to talk about controlled assembly. So here again, I'll use electronic functional polymer. So usually electronic polymers are solution processed into thin films. But as a result, the microstructure is very sensitive to its processing conditions. Typically, there are 3 steps of processing conditions. You need to do formulation, then you deposit the film into solid state, and a lot of time you need to do post-annealing, post-solvent treatment, post-processing to reach the final morphology. So the processing of this nanoscale thick film often involves various formulations with rapid flow drying kinetics, creating highly non-equilibrium conditions that lead to unpredictable morphology. So therefore, we want self-driving lab, autonomous lab to help us to identify the paths. Here, we want to produce conductive polymer thin film. We want to print a very highly conductive polymer thin film. P.PSS, this is the chemical structure of this conductive polymers. So P.PSS is actually pretty famous in many applications, sensors, electrochromic display, and also like battery binders, different areas. So however, if you purchase P.PSS directly from the vendor, and then sometimes following the literature, then you coat a film, you won't be able to get a high conductivity, or sometimes you get a high conductive film with full of defects. So that's kind of the thing. So therefore, I want to use our self-driving lab to help us to identify the paths that can give me a large-scale, highly conductive polymer thin film. So that's kind of the situation, and that's kind of the question that problem we want the Polybot to help us to solve. And the other question that is more from material science perspective, I also want to understand. So you see here, formulation, coding, post-processing. When you look at the literature, usually the literature individual work will fix the other two and change one variables in formulation, for example, and get a conclusion. I really want to know what are the relative importance of the variables in each process so that I know which features really matters more. So, okay, so here is the question, here is the problem. Then we want the Polybot to help us to solve this and also to help us to answer the question. So here I want to put this slide. Automation is not automatic, even though we have a self-driving lab, right? So first of all, we need to still design of the experiment. What are the problem? Well, what are the searching space? And then we need to think about how to let the robot to perform these experiments. Do we need to code the procedure? We also need to put in the data evaluation criteria to make sure the measurements are reproducible. And also we need to come out with the protocol to analyze the data. And then we also need to decide what is going to be the searching strategy here for us to do this, to solve this problem. So automation is not automatic. So for this study, design of experiments. So the experiments is, okay, we want to print highly conductive. High conductivity is one of our target, and we want the film to be large scale, low defect. So then defect is another objective. So then based on this objective, we come out with this workflow design of experiments. We want to change we want to change the formulation, change the coating rheology, drying kinetics, and changing the post-processing, and evaluating those two targets in the workflow and decision-making to close the loop. So this is a 7-dimensional design space with a total searching points close to 1 million. So then perform the experiments. So this is kind of how we traditionally, we will write down our notebook, right? The experimental notebook, saying what are the experiments we want to do. But now we just need to translate that into codes and let the robot to perform this accordingly. But it's not going, it is a sequential workflow, but the order in terms of doing which condition first, that's going to be decided by our searching strategy. So then analyze the data. So here we have two targets. One is the defects, and the other one is the conductivity. So conductivity, we use the probe station, automated probe station, 4-point probe to get the conductivity out. So here, in order, I want to highlight here is, in order to make sure the data reproducibility, we put in some logic here. For example, for each condition, for each set of processing condition, or for each experiment, we run twice. Then we will perform a normality test to see whether the data we get from those two measurements are normal. If they are normal, whether they are similar. If they are similar, we're going to use a t-test to ensure they are good enough to get the mean value sent to machine learning. If they are not, they are really, they are disliking each other, then it will trigger the third round, the first round. Then if it's still a problematic situation, then it will trigger alert to human scientists to take a look. Because processing those nanoscale SEC-FEM is a very non-equivalent process. Sometimes it's it's really hard. For some condition, it's not reproducible. The reproducibility has an issue. We have to build in this logic to make sure the data we send to AI are accurate. And the other one is the defect. So defect, we just use the imaging analysis to extract the coverage so that we can get an idea about the homogeneity. So this is the protocol that we set in the workflow to design, to analyze the data and ensure the data quality. Then the decision strategy, right? How we're going to run the experiment. So usually for this experiment, we're going to start to do a random sampling, get a few data points, produced to initialize the model. Then we need to then we will incorporate the Bayesian optimization active learning to do iterative exploration. So in a typical Bayesian optimization, in a typical active learning, the top candidate, see here, the top candidate in this list is always chosen for the next experiment. However, this may cause traps due to the competition of those two objective optimizations. So therefore, in this work, so this is a multi-objective optimization problem. So therefore here, Polybot use the importance guided Bayesian optimization. So this one, we prioritize the improvement in a challenging objective, which is the FEM conductivity. Then, while guided by a more achievable objective, which is the FEM coverage. Then, so this is a kind of the concept of importance in probability sampling. So basically, at each iteration, the next experimental candidates are ranked by their conductivity, and then sampled by a probability of their coverage prediction. So then we will run this kind of iterative optimization. So that's kind of the decision strategy or decision intelligence here. So this is the robotic workflow utilized for this autonomous discovery without human intervene. Well, sometimes human get some error saying maybe like every 25 or like 40 to 40 sample. It's randomly. Sometimes, I mean, it's still hardware, it's still machine. It may clock some here and there. We need to get human to fix it. But overall, it's autonomous with minimal human effort. Yeah, so this is the electrical characterization to get the resistance normalized by the thickness measurement. Yeah. So, okay, so this experiment is terminated by the budget. So we have roughly 80 substrate that we have a substrate holders inside of the robotic system. So therefore, if we use out all the substrate, it's basically the time that we need to trigger either terminate or trigger a human scientist to come and also change and replace the new substrate. But here luckily we finish everything within the entire one loop substrate budget. So this is, or this plot doesn't have any scientific meaning, but just give you a visualization about the complexity of the processing path. So basically, this one is the best performing candidate. Then you can trace back. So this is the AI identified processing pathway for getting this best candidate. So then, as a material scientist, we want to ask our original question, right? Which variables is actually the critical variables here? So therefore, we perform a data analysis on our data and realize the change in formulation plays the most important role in determining the final property. So therefore, we select a CRAW-EM as an in-depth characterization to look at the solution state structure in the formulation. And indeed, we find that by just adding a little bit additive will change the solution state structure dramatically, which resulted in a more continuity in the solid state film and boost up the performance. So that's kind of the data guided in-depth characterization to review the insights. And also, as an engineer, we also want to learn how to really translate this we also want to learn how to really translate this recipe to large scale. So this is also something data guided in-depth exploration to show, okay, there are two additives, but actually a well-known additive in literature reported for P.PSS will cause the film duetting. So therefore, it's not actually good for us to utilize for large-scale printing. We should switch to EG. So that's also a manufacturing recipe guidance. So this is the second work to show how Polybot can answer the question, right? Which processing pathway is the best to achieve my desirable target and properties, and what are the relative importance that you can surface to me. So then the last study I want to chat a bit more is about it, or this is actually the challenging one, how to study the materials in device. So here, what we are really interested in is the mixed conducting polymer. Mixed conducting polymers are the materials that facilitate both ionic and electronic conduction. So because of this unique functionality, it actually offers application in the fields such as energy storage, low energy consumption electronics, for example, like neuromorphic devices, and also serving as a kind of a platform for biosensors, bioapplications, because of their unique ionic and electronic conduction properties. So here I want to show two, like the representative schematic chemical structures of mixed conducting polymers. Usually they are with conjugated backbones for electronic charge carrier transport, and also polar side chain for the ionic conductivity, for the ion to be able to do the coupling with the backbone. So this is just a representative schematic image. So then mixed conducting polymers. So this field has been studied for maybe 2 decades and is dominated by chemists. So I'm a polymer physicist. The question that I really want to understand is the impact of assembled macrostructure diversity on the mixed conducting property. So this is the question in my mind. So I have a hypothesis. With the same chemical formula, if I can have a very aligned chain, this kind of polymer chain, very aligned chain conformation, I can allow better electron delocalization so that we can boost the electronic charge transport. And also, as long as I have some local pi stacking, I can allow the electronic charge carrier to hop from one chain to another chain so that I can enable long distance charge carrier transport. And also, because there's ion coupling here, I want to also have pretty rough porous morphology so that the electron and ion can do coupling easily. So this is kind of the hypothesis in my mind. I really want to have experiments to validate my hypothesis in a rapid manner. So therefore, here is the question: what are the design rules in packing structure for this mixed conducting polymers? This is a question asked for the self-driving lab. So then how to modulate the macrostructure, how to generate the diversity in macrostructure? Again, we use solution processing method. Here are the variables that we just initially put in. We think those are the variables that can help us to effectively change the packing structure within the same chemical formulation so that we can get a broad distribution of the packing structure and broad distribution of the property. So then the challenge here is actually this one. So mixed conducting polymer, if we want to get the mixed conducting property, see this is equation, we have to fabricate this electronic material into devices and connect the circuit and then do the measurement. So, and then following this equation, to get rid of this geometry parameters to extract the intrinsic materials property. This is complicated, right? So, and this is the most accurate, reliable way to do that. Then this is the flow chart for us to follow to get one data point out. It's a very lengthy procedure, and this will cause small data situation. Machine learning doesn't like small data. So what should we do here? So therefore, for this work, we have to be creative in decision making. So therefore, we design this adaptive decision-making autonomous platform. So this is, again, autonomous experimentation workflow. And then we put another layer of AI on top of it, which is adaptive AI supervisor that allow us to be adaptive and dynamic change. So as you can see, this is adaptive decision-making. This autonomous experiments, as I described like before, AI proposed the experiments. Then the advisor is performing the progress monitoring and do a real-time analysis on the data and compare which AI strategy is better and which variables are okay and not okay. So the AI advisor is going to suggest adjustment for the workflow. And then we also have a human machine interface built here because we want human scientists to be part of this loop to contribute their creativity as well. So human can deny and also accept the adjustment. So AI advisor serves as assistant. It's not a tool, it's assistant to human for this entire exploration. So this is close to the end. So this is the decision-making real-time dashboard. So again, at the beginning, we will do a random sampling to inject some data points so that the machine learning can be initialized. Then since here, this is very small data. So therefore, Gaussian process regression was selected as the starting decision-making strategy. And indeed, you see the performance is going up. Then the AI advisor is also doing in real-time analysis on the other algorithms. So then at a certain point, Gaussian process regression is no longer doing well, but the random forest is outperforming. AI advisor switch to random forest, then going up again. So that's kind of the way that how to make the entire exploration to be adaptive. And then, of course, this is kind of the result to give you an idea. By using this kind of adaptive decision-making, we can make the structure property this window much broader for us to extract the insights. And then it's still, even though it's, we already reduced the cycle of experiments dramatically, but still close to 100 data points. For expensive experiments, that's still not feasible. So therefore, we perform an unbiased representative sample selection based on the difference in performance, based on the difference in variables to select the most representative 10 samples for the expensive measurements, including the sorry, it's not showing up, but everything is in this paper published to perform, for example, synchrotron X-ray characterization to extract insights. So this work is basically telling us that self-driving lab can accelerate the cycle between hypothesis to validation. So this work, we further close more elements here, like including fabrication and also what generative AI and physics simulator to produce some simulated features. So those are ongoing effort in Polybot Lab that I'm not talking today, but hope in the future you'll see it out from our group. So this is kind of the last slide to show autonomous development is hard. Why it is hard? The answer is not easy as well. But basically, I want to highlight the culture among different domains, the education are very critical here. So at the end, I want to say, there are many consequences we can come out with autonomous discovery, methodologically changing how we answer, conceptual changing what we know in a more rapid way. And through this community, we'll have some pragmatic consequence that is shorten the discovery journey. I want to thank all the group members and also thank the funding agencies. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you very much. Actually, that was an excellent talk and impressive achievements. Truly. And I think it's very relevant to the core idea of broadening carbon ring since it's related to polymers. I think our audience really enjoyed and learned a lot. For the interest of time, we can probably take one or two questions from the audience. You can type in the Q&A box or you can raise your hand. So the first question is, I was fascinated to see the AI choosing among different processing routes. How does the model determine which processing path to pursue? And have you observed cases where it identified a strategy that a human researcher might not have considered?
Yeah, so so for this one, right? So as you can see, the AI advisor, even though the Gaussian process regression is the strategy that we use at the beginning to make a decision for the iterative active learning, but you can see we have a list of algorithms here trained real time using every individual data coming. So therefore, the AI advisor is noticing this one and also tracking the trend of this, the progress of this iterative exploration. So that's kind of how the AI advisor is making decisions. And the other thing is we also perform real-time Shapley data analysis. So this is actually critical for the human-machine interface or even for the human researcher. So like I said, at the beginning, we have many hypotheses actually, but I don't want us to spend a lot of time in prioritize our hypothesis. So therefore, we threw in all our hypotheses here. So for example, substrate feature, which is we produce some nano groove on the substrate. We think, okay, that's a sexy design. We put it here to guide assembly. But then through this real-time Shapley analysis, you can see here, it's useless. So the human hypothesis on this feature is useless. So then because the AI advisor can surface this to us, then we can get rid of this variable on the fly during the autonomous exploration so that we can save budget to the more important variables. So this is kind of the adaptive decision-making loop looks like. AI advisor help us to monitor the process, help us to train different algorithms, make decisions, show the metrics, and also create a human-machine interface so that human can adjust their hypothesis on the fly. So that's kind of the uniqueness and also advantage I see.
Thank you. So quickly, another question. Can AI identify human errors in experiments?
At the current stage, probably no. Right. I hope so in the future. So for example, my lab is testing a AI assistant strategy. So instead of recording the things that we think are important, we get an AI assistant that passively record everything. Then hopefully in the future, the AI can capture what are the biases, muscle memories here so that we can identify what is the human error in this loop. So this is ongoing, interesting undergraduate student research topic. Yeah.
One last question. Interesting talk. Have you used any other good molecular descriptors to model polymers apart from the Kate or Morgan fingerprints?
Yeah, good question. Yeah. So yes, we use the molecular features, for example, the fingerprints, and also because this polymer is electronic functional polymer, so therefore we also utilize the DFT simulated electronic structure as our feature to describe this molecule, so that it can be turns to be more it's easier for us to understand why this chemical structure gave us this absorption, like the energy happens here. So that's another feature that we put into this electronic functional polymers. But I would say like for polymeric materials, the representation features, molecule structure, molecular weight, distribution, or sometimes you can include some physical features. For example, persistent length, rigidity of the polymer, and also polarity, right? Interactions. There are many other physical features can be included as well.
Thank you. I guess that concludes this session. Thank you very much for your time and for the very interesting talk, and I hope to see you soon again.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah.
So that takes us to the second presenter today, Dr. James Chapman. So let me introduce him while he's setting up his presentation. Dr. James Chapman is an assistant professor of mechanical engineering and material science and engineering at Boston University. Dr. Chapman earned his PhD in material science and engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology in 2020, followed by postdoctoral research at Lawrence Livermore National Lab before joining Boston University. His research lies at the intersection of computational material science, atomistic simulations, and artificial intelligence. By integrating machine learning with first principles calculations and molecular simulations, his group develops new approaches for discovering catalysts, corrosion-resistant materials, and high-entropy alloys for sustainable energy and environmental applications. Dr. Chapman is also a junior faculty fellow of Boston University's Hariri Institute for Computing and Computational Science and Engineering, reflecting his leadership in AI-enabled scientific discovery. Today, he will present interpretability of machine learning models for probing atomic scale interactions, discussing how explainable AI can provide deeper physical insight into materials behavior. Well, thank you for joining, and the floor is yours, Dr. Chapman.
All right, thank you. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Today, I'm going to talk about this kind of high-level idea of interpretability for machine learning models, but specifically with this atomistic simulation community. So just to give you a general idea, I'm sure many of us have seen a slide like this in the past, where essentially we have a couple of different types of paradigms that all, in principle, should work together to help us design and discover new materials. But I think we can make certain parts of this a little bit better. In particular, I want to focus on the third and fourth paradigm. This is primarily where my research lives. So computational material science, this would be our simulations. Could be anything from density functional theory, these first principle simulations, all the way up to, say, coarse-grained simulations where many approximations are made. So a lot of times when we deal with these computations, we're really focused on trying to get the best accuracy we can using the approximations we have in order to efficiently simulate systems as realistically as we can. This fourth paradigm is the one that I have a lot of interest in, which is machine learning, data science, whatever buzzword we want to call it these days. But it's essentially high-dimensional, nonlinear mappings between some input and some output. And that's really where I want to focus my talk today, is on the intersection of these third and fourth paradigms, specifically for atomistic material science. So how does this actually work for the atomistic community? We start with a structure of atoms. That is always going to be the case. And realistically, we need some way of representing that structure of atoms. This is what is referred to as features or descriptors. There are many different forms of that. I'm going to show a couple of forms, specifically graph-based forms throughout my talk today. But once we have descriptors, that becomes our input for our machine learning algorithms. Again, at this point, pick whichever algorithm you want in order to make your structure property mapping. I will go into a little bit of detail today about how the architecture of, say, your graph neural networks can actually be tailored in a way to make your models more interpretable. But in principle, this is the workflow that we often work with. So really, it's all about featurization of our structures, and that should, in principle, encode the physical and chemical identity of the material that we're looking at, and then pick a particular tunable algorithm that you want in order to get your mapping. The problem, though, and this has been a problem not just in material science, but the machine learning community for quite a while, is this black box problem. Machine learning models, whether it's machine learning, deep learning, AI, they're all very good at one thing. And it's taking an input, projecting it onto some high-dimensional space, finding a nonlinear relationship in that high-dimensional space, and mapping that to an output. And it is shockingly good at doing that. It's why they've become as popular as they have. And that works very well for certain types of problems like, say, image recognition. But if we're talking about designing and discovering new materials, that black box approach really doesn't help us, because at this point, I can more or less take any input data that I want, map it to any property that I'm interested in, and have a model. But that doesn't really help me design a new material or discover new materials. And this is where the interpretability part starts becoming more and more important for the physical sciences. We need to be able to answer questions like, why did my model make the prediction that it did? Can my model tell me something about that prediction, right? The whole point is that we're mapping something like structure to properties. Can it back out what was it about that structure that was important for those properties? And unfortunately, doing this has traditionally not been a simple pathway. This has often involved a lot of post-processing on our predictions, various metrics that we can pull out, ensemble learning. There's many different ways that you can begin to get at this interpretable framework, but it's still kind of trial and error at this point. And one question that we have is, can we make this more automated? Can we make this more intuitive to us as the researchers? What makes this a little bit more interesting is that interpretability actually has different forms. And this is something that I think is talked about a little bit less than it should be, because interpretability is another buzzword for the machine learning community. But the way I see it is it really means two separate things. The first thing is what I call intrinsic interpretability. This is more about the model itself, right? The model has some architecture, it has some mathematical formalism. Can that formalism tell us something about why that structure property mapping was made in the first place? But there's also extrinsic interpretability. And this is where I think this interpretability idea gets very interesting. And this is less about the specific model itself, but more about the fact that you can do this nonlinear optimization for more or less any function that you want. And the question is, can I use machine learning to learn metrics that are interpretable? So it's the metric that machine learning is actually mapping that is interpretable, not the ML model itself. And can I learn metrics that would otherwise be difficult or impossible to learn on my own, right? If I have some metric that has 100 parameters in it, it may be very difficult to create some empirical optimization to learn that metric when my input is these complex atomistic structures. But can I use machine learning to make that mapping easier? And it's really the combination of these that actually gives us the ability to design and discover new materials more intuitively. And this is what I really mean by interpretability is the model and the types of metrics that we're predicting really need to be intuitive to us as researchers in order to guide the creativity aspect of finding and designing new materials. Now, I want to focus today's talk on a specific subset of problems, and it's this idea of order and disorder within materials. I find this particularly interesting because I think most of us are familiar with things like positional disorder. How are my atoms arranged in my structure? Are they crystal-like? Are they liquid-like? But there are many other types of disorder. You could have topological disorder, which is similar to positional disorder, but not restricted to it. Think of topological disorder more as the collective network of some set of information about your atomic structure. And then compositional disorder. This is particularly relevant in the alloy community, where you may have a fixed lattice, so your positional disorder is effectively zero, right? It's a perfect crystal. But if you have 4, 5, 6 plus elements in your alloy, there are many different ways for those elements to arrange themselves. So that in and of itself is some metric of disorder. And all of these ultimately drive the properties of our materials. Now, for today's talk, I'm going to focus on positional and compositional disorder. But as you go through this, you can begin to think of ways that more or less both of these will interface with things like topological disorder. So the outline of today's talk, I'm going to focus on two problems. One is this idea of what I'm calling global to local. Effectively, can you propagate information at a higher level down onto individual atoms within your structure using what I'm calling multi-scale knowledge transfer? And the second is physics-aware graph learning. This is different than physics-informed. So essentially, can you automatically pull out important structure and chemical mappings from your graph neural network without doing any post-processing. It's just simply part of the learning process, and actually use that to explain why a particular property, say, changed as a function of the structure. So I'm going to focus on this global to local part first. I'm going to thank Boston University and the Hariri Institute for funding this work, and special shout out to my students, Bamadele, who's a PhD student, and an undergraduate student who did some work with us last summer, Aidan Phillips. Before I jump into the machine learning part, I first want to give you a sense of what we mean by global and local. If I have a collection of atoms, there are many different ways that I can examine the structure of those atoms. But realistically, that is broken into two categories, a global description and a local description. The global description is more concerned about the network of connected atoms. So this is in some ways back to that idea of topological disorder. It may not look at the network itself, but it treats the entire collection of atoms as one entity. So that would imply that for a structure, a single structure, I have one feature vector that somehow encodes the structure and chemistry of that entire structure. This is particularly useful at distinguishing groups of atoms from each other, but also collective behavior. For example, if I start in a crystal state and I become a liquid state, I could say examine that transition pathway at the global level, and this is where something like a global descriptor would be very useful. The other side of this is the local description. So kind of what it sounds like, I'm looking at a specific atom within my structure. Now I could examine just the, say, first nearest neighbors, or I could go out 20 angstroms. It doesn't really matter. It's up to you, depending on what property you're interested in or what you're trying to understand. But it's more about examining the specific local environment around that atom. This also means that we have a feature vector for every atom within the structure. So if I have a 10 atom structure, I have 10 feature vectors. If I have 100,000 atoms, I have 100,000 feature vectors. This is more useful at understanding localized structure. For example, if I have an atom that is being surrounded by vacancies or other point defects versus something that is in its pure crystal state, a local feature vector would be able to pull that information out, but also local properties. For example, if I want to understand the atomic forces on my system, every single atom would have a different set of forces. So this is where something like these local descriptors would be very useful. Now, in all of the work that we do, we use graphs as our featurization of our material system. So what does this actually look like? Because there are many different ways that you can build a graph for an atomic structure. We use what is called a line graph formalism. So this effectively means we break the structure up into multiple graphs. For example, there's this metal water cluster here. We can break this up into, say, 3 graphs. The first graph, which is called G-min, this would be more of an elemental or bond graph. If you're in the alloy community, this would be your 1 and 2 body term graph, where the nodes represent specific atoms, and then the edges between those nodes represent, say, bonds within your system. You can also build a line graph. That's what is L of G-min. Here, this line graph formalism is essentially the nodes in that graph are now the edges in your first graph, and then the edges in your line graph are now the interactions between nodes. So the easiest way to think of this is, say, your bond and bond angle graph. And then you can keep extending this out into varying n-body terms. For most material systems, you really only need to go up to, say, 4-body interactions, but you could always go higher. It just becomes prohibitively expensive at some point. Now, for everything that I do within this talk, all of our graphs are going to be built in this way, and for the most part, we either use the 1-2 body graph or the combination of that plus the 2 and 3 body graph. Now, once we have that graph, we will take that and feed that into a graph neural network. There's 3 different processes that happen within the graph neural network. The first is node and edge encoding. We don't just say the element type for the node. We would, for example, project the actual node label onto a, say, one-hot encoding vector over the entire periodic table. The edges themselves aren't necessarily just the bond distance. They may be some projection of spherical harmonics and so on. So you want to project the actual information that you have contained within the graph, the raw graph, into some numerical way so that you can feed it into your neural network. We then do message passing. So essentially the information is propagated through a series of functions throughout the graph. So the actual graph that does the learning is a kind of updated graph. This is particularly useful for propagating information throughout your network. And this is primarily why the graph neural networks work as well as they do for material systems. And then finally, we do feature pooling. In the event of, say, a global descriptor, you would want to pool all of your atomic features into one feature for the whole structure. If you were learning node level things, your feature pooling may simply be bypassed for the most part, and then you would just focus on the raw encoded features. And then finally, that would output what is called a graph embedding vector. So that embedding vector is a numerical vector that encodes all of the information about your graph onto this, say, higher dimensional space. And that is the actual feature that then goes and learns, say, the property of interest. Now, for learning, say, a global structure, we use a platform that we call SODAs. And the way this works is, let's say I start with a structure, and it looks like what is in this red box. And after some time t, maybe at some temperature, the atoms have moved around. And then after, say, another amount time t, the atoms have even further moved around. So perhaps I started in my crystal state, and now after some period of time, I am in a liquid state. Well, we can encode each structure as a whole along that pathway using an algorithm called SODAs. The way this works is for every single atom or every single structure along that pathway, we would build that a line graph, or that line graph representation. So we'd have two graphs in this case. You would have your 1 and 2 body term and your 2 and 3 body term graph. Those would be propagated through your graph neural network. And then that encoding, which may be on, say, 64 or 100 plus dimensions, we then project that onto a 2D space using something like UMAP. A caveat here is that you don't need to use UMAP. That is not a critical part of this, but it is useful for us to visualize the actual learning that the GNN has done. So UMAP is purely for visualization, but everything that comes out of that projection could be done in the original high dimensional space. An even more important caveat to this is that our graph neural network is not trained. The weights of our GNN are completely randomized, and you effectively get the exact same pathway regardless of what random seed you would actually use. So that makes it more or less agnostic to any scenario that you could apply to this. And again, in this embedding space, a single point represents an entire structure, not an individual atom. So easy example of this is something like the melting of bulk aluminum. So I would start in a perfect crystal. I would heat my system up until eventually it liquefied. And what you're seeing here is the two-dimensional manifold of, I think it was about 64 dimensions in the actual graph embedding space. So again, each point here represents an entire structure. And what you'll notice is that you can group an obvious pathway through the space. But more than that, we can actually define a global order parameter on this space. And the way this works is you pick a structure to start, you pick a structure as your end, and you more or less find a pathway through this space. There's many ways you can do it, but you find a pathway through the space, and effectively how far along that pathway you are represents your order metric. Why this is particularly useful is that you haven't really done any sort of manual fine-tuning here, right? You took your structures from, say, your molecular dynamics simulation, you fed them into this unsupervised GNN, it produces this low-dimensional manifold for you. You define two endpoints, a path is found, and now you have a way of defining essentially how far along that transition pathway you actually were without telling the algorithm anything in particular. Now, you can do this for many other types of systems as well. It's not just simple, pure aluminum. You can do this for oxides, for complex alloys. You can even do it for molecules. Those aren't shown here. The point is that the order metric is preserving both spatial and temporal relationships. Spatial just implies that points can be differentiated. If I have a crystal versus a liquid, they're not overlapping each other at the same point. But temporal is the interesting thing here. Because many algorithms already exist to do spatial differentiation. But the temporal part is what's important. The temporal part implies that locations in the latent space follow the actual true underlying structural evolution in time. So we can identify things like transition points. We can identify various regions where, say, your simulation was just oscillating about some equilibrium structure before transitioning into another one. None of that type of fidelity is possible without being able to capture the temporal aspect of your structural transition. And again, the graph neural network is randomly initialized. There is no training that is involved in this process. So now that we have this global information that actually encodes something very useful about the structural transitions of our materials, the question is, can we take this a step further and actually propagate that information downwards to individual atoms in our system? Because we know that we can uniquely identify local atomic environments. That ability has been around for decades at this point. So the question is, can we map that global information down onto the local motifs? And the answer is, in principle, yes, because this concept is not new. Take an example of what is called common neighbor analysis. You're effectively saying, here is an individual atom in my system. Can I label it as a state level variable like FCC, BCC, so the crystal structure of it? So this idea of labeling individual atoms with global information is not new. It's been around for decades. But the question is, can you generalize it? Can you, instead of having to hard code all of these relationships, can you use a graph neural network to effectively automate it for you? So as a kind of high-level understanding of what this would look like, let's go back to our aluminum melting example. So we have a starting point and an end point. Starting point is crystal, end point is liquid. And let's say I start with my perfect structure. And after some time t, that local atomic environment has become perturbed. Maybe I have added some temperature to my system, so the atoms are moving around. But what's interesting is that local atomic environment does not exist at, say, one unique temperature. You may find that local atomic environment at different points along that transition, right? Atoms are moving around, especially at higher temperatures. There's no reason that local environment is uniquely mapped to a specific temperature. So in principle, though, we've labeled all of our global structures with this order metric. Can I then project that information down onto that local atomic environment and effectively label it as, in some high-level way, say the average temperature that that local atomic environment would actually occur at? Now, again, I'm using structural disorder here as the case study, but you could do this for any type of transition you want. You could label things based on how far away they are from a transition state. You could label them based on phases. It doesn't matter. Once you have labels, you can label them however you want. But in this case, we're talking about structural ordering. So let's go back to our example. And I'm going to pick an atom out of my structure. And I know that that atom, say, occurs at a couple of different points along that embedding space the GNN has found. Now I'm going to take that information and I'm going to feed it into a second GNN. This GNN is not unsupervised. This GNN is actually learning information. So this would be trained. So I'm effectively saying, if I give you a local atomic graph, can I feed that through a GNN and effectively tell me what is the most likely point along this pathway that that local atomic environment would be found at? Now, we've tested this on a number of different scenarios. I'm going to stick to the aluminum example just for consistency. This is an example of a variety of bulk structures that evolve at different temperatures. You can see that at lower temperatures, the local environments are more or less crystalline, as you would expect them to be. But as you get to larger and larger temperatures, getting closer to, say, the melting temperature, your actual bulk structure is a continuous spectrum of ordering. You may have some atomic environments that are more crystal-like, other atomic environments that are more liquid-like, and that just gets larger and larger towards the liquid-like side as you increase temperature until you hit that liquid threshold, and then everything is effectively labeled as a liquid. What this tells us, though, as a very simple example, that this metric can, in fact, encode something like an average temperature